Station Lamia Prime by Mr. Malice. We approached the floating structure, a ring with a large pillar mounted in the center. From it, a cacophony of electromagnetic waves erupted through the cosmos, assaulting our ship with near unstoppable strength. Our shields were strong enough to repel most advances, but the waves consistently tore through some sections, deadening rooms for minutes at a time. Death-tone plates shimmered in the blue light with a magenta pigment carefully dotting the lower half of most plates. I am a derelict, ordered by the Cosmological Council to investigate this station, Lamia Prime. They mentioned peculiar anomalies that had been previously undocumented were a constant force in this place. Between visionary hallucinations to mimetic distortion, this place covered all of the enigmatic anomalies recorded by the Council with varying levels of details. As a derelict, I was only sent in to investigate and record any findings. A crew of 25 men and women on a small shuttle are to monitor my neurological behavior, as that is the most prevalent report when passing through this area. This lone station was a place of vast technological advancement, unrivaled in its prime. Now, it is a ghost of what it once was. There were no signs of external damage, no signs of technological malfunction, no signs of a panic or struggle aboard the station. Everyone just disappeared, leaving only their clothes lying on the ground. Chilling. Absolutely. More chilling, however, is that the reactor is still running without an operator. Unless they developed an autonomous reactor, which is nigh impossible, then this is the work of an anomaly. The station was in range for the smaller pneumopod to be shot towards it. There was no technology within the pod itself, only lead plating to protect the contents within from radiation. I climbed into its cockpit, and before me was a window, through which I could see the grotesque station, listing slowly in a dead orbit. The radio clicked on.
"You ready?"
A female voice blared. "Yep," I responded, almost excited to enter the station's recesses. The cabin around me, laced with woven cloth to protect the contents from kinetic force, began to expand. These were the punch pillows, so to speak, and they grew rapidly, surrounding my body in their grasp. Then came the punch. A massive plume of pneumatically sealed air exploded from behind the shuttle, and I propelled forward towards the station. Above me, circles of lights turned to lines, and the station ahead grew into a vast, rotating mass. I was pulled into it, and I was about to slam into the side when an unknown force cushioned my assault. My window had strings of baby blue constantly crawling from bottom to top.
"Don't worry. It's merely an electron field. It will pull you in shortly."
The female voice spoke. And just like that, it did. I was being guided gently into a small opening near the bottom of the pillar, where I was thrown into a room filled with meteorites and asteroids. Essentially the junk drawer of this station, where it preserves any meteors that come hurling its way towards the station. The airlock spewed open and the pressure kicked the door off its hinges, opening my deflating cabin to the meteor storage. I got out, searching immediately for a door to go through. Luckily, there was an illuminated door opposite the entrance, a bulkhead of sorts, clearly where the airlock was. I stammered over to it, carefully weaving through the meteors until I could embrace the handle on the door. To my surprise, it turned without hesitation, indicating that it was recently used. As it opened, I pulled out my plasma pistol, standard issue for all derelict personnel. Inside was a well-lit, glossy surface with dotted dirt patterns all around. I slowly walked in and closed the door behind me, swiftly jolting back and forth as I checked the room for intruders. Nothing found. As the door slid into place, it automatically sealed and fresh oxygen was pumped into the room. I turned up my visor, allowing the oxygen to fill my lungs. I looked down and saw more dirt, once again dotted towards the door out. Cautiously I approached. The glassy texture of this place made the dots stand out to an extreme. The door slashed open with both sides moving in perfect unison, something now alien to me entirely. Before me was a vast hallway that ran seemingly forever, then wrapped around the sides. All I knew was that I was at the bottom of the pillar, and around me stood flat, dead, black monoliths of incredible size, silent from lack of use. Brushing past one caused its black face to ignite into bluish tones with a blaring sound cascading down the hallways and echoing back to me. The screaming reverberation startled me as it returned and split off into the other halls. Disturbingly enough, I could hear other sounds it carried as it passed. The screen spoke an ancient dialect originating in primordial English. I could only make out Lamia Prime and Welcome from the degraded radio. Beyond it, I saw a large corridor which whipped to the right, interwoven into a hive of lost knowledge. I began my investigation, only to be interrupted by the perfect porcelain white halls having only one dark brown interlocutor, more particles leading off from where I came from. Dust from the meteorites, no doubt. I followed the breadcrumb trail, which traced the halls loosely. Whoever this was, they were disoriented. Each step into this place was another step into madness. White halls, white floors, white fluorescent lights, with only the light baby blue interjections of screens followed by green and magenta iridescence radiating through the windows. The iridescent glow was hypnotic, perfectly even in its distribution. Wait, green? Thought the star was blue. Taking a slow and cautious step into a small room decorated with dispersed and erratic placement of lab tech, I gazed out the nearby window at the star, which was indeed blue. Looking back at its iridescence, I saw blue and magenta pigment. The magenta was the color of the nebula, so that's consistent. Perhaps a part of the anomaly. Down the corridor, I heard gas spew as a door screamed open. I crouched and slowly walked towards the sound. All was silent in this moment. I approached, peering through the quartzite glass at a now open door, with a shimmering light exuding from it. My feet squealed on the floor as I motioned towards it, and as the first squeak from my foot echoed from beneath me, the door gently closed. My radio clicked on, and again I could hear that female voice.
The whole station stood still for a good 5 minutes. What the hell is happening in there?
Stood still, I thought. How the hell does an entire station of this size stand still, then go right back to regular rotation? I clicked my radio. I believe there's another being aboard this station. Dirt tracks have alluded to it. Preparing to investigate. I realized that I hadn't asked about the station, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. I opened my mouth and no words came out. Made me shudder. I moved towards the door, which automatically opened upon noticing my movement. I readied my pistol and stood with my back against the frame. Snapping into place with my pistol aimed into the room, I swiftly strutted in. Nary a sound but the squeaks of my boots and the charge of plasma. The room had no alternative entrances or exits. Nothing was there. Not even a sign of life, no dirt on the ground. Nothing. Everything was as it should be. Noticing this, my heart began to pound. Maybe a malfunction. But thus far, I haven't seen the station's infrastructure malfunction even minorly. The radio clicked again.
Warning. Magnetic storm. Prepare for electronics and machines to begin malfunctioning or turning off entirely.
My heart jumped again. The thought of more of these malfunctions happening was comforting, but also terrifying. Almost immediately, the magenta hue began to offset the turquoise, and the iridescence faded as a massive nebula began to envelop the station. Now, all that shone through the window was magenta, interrupted by streaks of reddish lightning. Magnetic storms were no joke. They have blasted whole ships out of the stars. However, this one was different. It seemed almost targeted. The lighting slashed through the hull of the outer ring. Gargantuan pillars of light erupted from within the cloud, and plasmatic fire skewered throughout it. It was collapsing. The outer ring no doubt acts as a gyroscope for the damn station. I need to get the hell out of here before the gravity starts to decay. I bolted down the hall, with the rooms behind me exploding into magenta tones that roughly splattered against the wall. Panic shrouded me, and I began to sprint blindly towards a staircase. I grabbed my radio, almost screaming, "The storm is tearing through the station. I need to evac now!" And almost immediately, a calm response resonated from my earpiece.
What the fuck are you talking about, Damien? The storm is oncoming. It's not even here yet. We still have an ETA of 3 hours.
I stopped. No chaos encapsulated the halls behind me. Just silence. I jogged down the staircase I had ran up, and saw that the station was all intact. The radio clicked back.
Are you alright? Your neuron activity is spiking right now. Perhaps we should evac and get a mag helm for you.
She spoke in a very worried tone. With a shaking voice, I responded, "Yeah, get me out of here." She responded,
Are you positive? You understand the danger of sticking around, right?
Confusion struck like a bat at the back of my head. "What the hell are you talking about, Helen? Get me out of here," I shouted back. Audibly frustrated, Helen spoke.
If you insist, then fine. We still have 2.5 hours till the magnetic storm is on us.
Before I could speak, my throat scratched and only a whine was let out. The fuck is going on here? I thought. Guess there's no helping it now. Got 2.5 hours in hell. Much as I would like to get out of here, I would need Helen to send a shuttle. For some reason, she couldn't hear what I was saying. Sounded like she was hearing something entirely different. I pressed onward. The clicking and whirring of the space station's electronics began to grow louder. I looked at the iridescence again. The pale blue and magenta hue were even. The nebulon cloud that enveloped the station began to grow in size, indicating the magnetic storm. I eventually wormed my way through the facilities until I reached a room with a computer that spoke my dialect. I opened the computer, finding that this station Lamia Prime, was one of a number of stations. It mentioned another, in Belial's Trench, about 10,000 meters down, called Substation Lamia. Belial is another anomalous planet. Prime is where they all sent their data. Instead of pouring through 13 petabytes of data, I instead searched for a simple map. When I found a file containing technology, mapping, room layout, and eventually a full map, I was worried. There were several recalculation maps, one which stated the floor 133 was above floor 142, and one where floor 133 was in the outer ring, where only floors 200 through 220 were. These recalculations happened once every week, and a recalc was scheduled in just a few minutes from now. but between all of the recalcs, I found that only 133 changed position, and was rarely in the same place twice. I checked for a room layout of floor 133 and found that the rooms were under constant recalc 2. I found eventually that floor 133 was where the reactor was held, which means I have to hunt this floor down to shut off this station. The recalculation began and would take an estimated 10 minutes to complete. I wish it would be instant like at Prometheus. This station is responsible for sending a few encrypted messages to Prometheus and a number of other Lifehold stations, but the encryption doesn't make sense whatsoever. It's a basic encryption that a preschooler could solve, but the message is still taking the galaxy's best scientists to decipher. The messages are sent to each of the 5 Lifehold stations, sometimes voice codes, sometimes text, and even sometimes Morse code. A dead format from centuries ago. Thus far, they have only determined that it is a 12-word statement split up into 2 sentences sent in 5 separate messages. They have only determined where 2 words go, and that is send and assimilating, in their placement in the statement. They have deciphered that send is the first word of the first sentence, and that assimilating is the 6th word of the second sentence. They sent 3 units of derelicts to help, with only 2 returning in full health. The station has baffled everyone involved due to its impossibility of investigation. The screen beeped, saying that the recalc was done and that floor 133 was 3 floors above me. I checked the layout and the reactor was on the left, 5 doors down. I practically leaped out of the chair, crouching down and gliding through the corridor to the staircase. When I reached the staircase, I made careful note of the floor I was on, floor 62. I sprinted up the stairs. The next floor was 63, 64, and 62. I checked the floor above me and it was 63. Wait, what? Hold on now. Maybe floor 133 disguises itself as the floor you were just on. Doesn't explain the next floors repeating though. I opened the door to floor 62, 5 doors down on the left, and I was in the lab room. I went back to the staircase and began ascending till I was back at floor 62, where I entered again and jogged 5 doors down to the left. Again, the lab room. This time I grabbed a small glass bottle on the way out. Back at the staircase, I placed the bottle on the floor before entering the staircase. I jogged up the stairs. 63, 64, 62 again. I opened the door and sure enough, there it was. The damned bottle. Okay, I thought. Let's try going down. I began to descend, going down to 63. Now I was getting frustrated. I don't have time to play games. I walked over to the edge of the staircase and peered up. An endless flight was above me, same below. I opened the door to 62, grabbed the bottle that happily waited for me, and closed the door. This time I sat the bottle on the railing next to 62, keeping an eye on it as I jogged up to 63, 64, and when I reached what was supposed to be 133, the bottle remained where it was. I looked at the sign on the door, and it said 62. Turning around, I saw the bottle standing there. Frustrated, I took the bottle and slammed it against the wall where it shattered, bouncing off an invisible force. I was shocked. I looked at the wall I had thrown it against and placed my hand on it. A pale blue luminescence echoed from where my hand had met the wall. I grew curious and began to apply pressure, only to see the sign next to the door begin to distort. It now said 74, and when I tore my hand away, it said 62. So that means I ascended 12 floors, I started counting during my descent, passing shards of broken glass 9 times. I eventually reached a point where I was 3 floors above where I began. I pressed against the wall and sure enough, it said 133. The real sign was slightly above where it should be and was ascending. I opened the door to be met with the same corridor as 62. Perhaps I have to distort the energy causing this visual fluctuation. I clicked my radio.
Hey, can you fire a high-energy EMP at the lower half of the central pillar? There's some energetic force blocking my progress.
Immediately, it clicked back.
Are you sure you're okay?
Helen said. Her tone was off.
I'm fine. Why do you ask?
I'm serious. You need to evac, alright? You have an hour and a half until the magnetic storm hits, and you don't want to be on board when it does.
I realized that the anomaly is still messing with my comms, so that's not an option. Then another idea struck me. I pulled out my pistol and set it to stun. Maybe the energy blast from it will be strong enough to distort the field. I pointed it right at the door and began charging. Just before I released, I heard a shout.
Don't shoot!
It sounded like it was right next to me. I jolted and released the trigger. It struck the field. A streak of blue tore through the hexagonal field that had encapsulated the entire staircase. Floor 133, finally. But the door was halfway through the ceiling. I couldn't see the button to open it, so I was going to have to go to the next floor. I tried my comms again.
Helen, I just distorted a sort of field in the stairwell, and I'm about to enter the floor that has the reactor on it.
I waited a minute. No response.
Hello? Helen, you there?
Again, no response. I turned and was about to jog up the stairs when my foot touched something soft. I looked down to see colorful clothing lying on the ground. My heart sunk when I noticed a scorch mark on the right shoulder. Looking around, there were dozens of clothing sets laid out. Shirt above, pants below. Like ghosts. What the fuck? I thought. I slowly walked up the stairs, passing by the shirts of varying color. None of the others had a mark on their shoulder. Nothing made sense to me right now. When I made it to the next floor, I saw floor 133 was still slowly gliding through the wall, but I could at least access it. I had to kneel to press the button, and when it opened, a headache slammed in the back of my skull. Like a train, it struck again and again. A migraine. Whatever the anomaly is, I found it. When I hopped onto the floor, an icy chill ran up my spine, causing me to reflexively contort. My arms pulled to my chest and my eyes fixated ahead of me without moving. Now, terror filled my lungs as I stumbled towards a large observation deck. Before me were shattered fragments of a previous planet, still intact to some capacity. The Nebulon cloud was far smaller now, and the iridescence on the ground was a dark blue complemented by a dead magenta. Now the blue was overpowering the magenta. This terror was only furthered when I turned around. Hundreds of clothes were scattered to and fro, with the shirts all pointed in the same direction, towards the 5th door on the left side of the entrance. I walked over silently. I had the innate sense I was being stared at. My pistol drawn, I pointed it towards the door. Now, the clothing seemed to disperse around my feet, clearing a path as I walked. Parting the sea of clothes, I made my way to an inactive generator. I placed my hand on a terminal and looked at the readings. I couldn't make out the dialect, but the layout of the readings were familiar, luckily. The reactor's energy output was above 60% with a 10% usage. I was confused by this, as a Lifehold station normally has an 80% usage with a 90% output. But the numbers were fading. I looked forward to see a lever, the obvious on-off switch. I moved towards it, only to feel something brush against my arm. I jumped forward and glared back to see all the clothing was now floating. Shirts above, pants below. Neither were filled with anything. Flat clothing that walked towards me slowly, in unison. I grabbed the lever and they all halted, as if scared to see what would happen if I were to turn the reactor off. One motioned, and I immediately pulled the lever. As swiftly as the clunk of the energy output shutting off sounded, the entire room went dark. The clothing fell and the room was filled with magenta hue, followed by red crackles of lightning. And only in those flashes of red did I see black, smoky bodies, humanoid, standing where the clothing did. I screamed, firing at one of them, and they did not respond. None of the smoky bodies were moving. Despite this, and despite me seeing the bolt of blue slash into the wall, I saw a burn mark form on the shoulder of one of the articles of clothing. I sprinted wildly past all of them, feeling nothing as I ran right through some. Panic filled me again, and the cloud of the magnetic storm began tearing away at the room I was in. I opened the door and slid out just as a flash of red revealed that the smoky figures were all standing around me, with their arms extended. I slammed into the ground. The smooth white tiles were comforting to me. I clicked on my radio.
Helen, can you hear me?
I yelled. No response, yet again. I ran down 4 flights of stairs, ran into floor 62, which now had clothing in the corridors. Disarray filled the corridor. I heard a loud crash at one end of the hall. The magnetic storm was upon us. I saw the cloud ripping at the outer ring. I ran towards the meteorite store, only to be halted by a figure holding the same pistol that I use, with it charging and pointed at me. Another derelict? But how? Nobody else was sent in. I drew my pistol and pointed it back. Mine was still set on stun, but theirs was shrouded in purple. Not a word between us. The figure was feminine, and tears streamed down her face. She screamed at me.
Are you one of them?
I calmly spoke back. One of who? My name is Damien. Who are you? She shook as I spoke, and not a word was spoken from her lips. But she did peer out the window. With a dead expression, she took the pistol and pointed it at her temple. I quickly shouted, "Whoa, wait!" But by the time my words left my mouth, a blast of purple clouds and scarlet streaks soared through her skull, annihilating her head. I looked out the window and saw a flash of red shear towards my corridor, and I braced for impact. A flash of white. I blinked, and I was on the floor in 62. My nose and ears were bleeding extremely. I groaned and rose to my feet. The first sound I heard was over the radio.
Damien, are you there? Damien!
I clicked my radio on.
Yeah, I'm fine. Glad to hear from you. What's the ETA on the magnetic storm?
Helen, who was clearly confused, said,
The station was torn apart when we left. We tried to wait for you, but we took a mag blast right to our bow. We left. It's been 2 days, Damien.
Couldn't comprehend what she meant. 2 days? I clicked back.
What are you talking about, Helen? How long have I been out?
A moment of silence. Then the click.
Damien, what the fuck is going on? Been out. You went totally dark. It happened like 30 minutes after you left. How long have you been in there? How long do you think you've been in there?
To me, it's only been about 2 hours, Helen. I don't know what's happening. All I know is what I saw.
Helen quickly responded, panic in her voice.
You need to get off that station, Damien. I already ordered for its kinetic destruction. They are going to be blasting it in a few days. Getting rid of it altogether.
Before I could respond, she spoke.
We have 30 minutes to get you out of there. There's another storm coming in. Are you ready?
I groaned again.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'll head to the meteor store.
I began to stumble haphazardly through the halls. When I reached the junction to the meteor store, I was about to turn, and then I noticed the dirt trail lead right to where I woke up. I followed the trail back to find that it led in different directions. I began that way, figuring I had enough time to quickly find where it went and head back. Stumbling slowly through the hallways, I looked at my watch, which indicated that I had about 15 minutes before the arrival of the storm. 15 minutes? It's only been like 5. I clicked on my radio.
Helen, how long has it been since you contacted me recently?
Helen responded.
It's been only like 10 minutes, Damien. Are you near the meteorite store?
I snapped awake in panic.
10 minutes? Helen, my watch says 15, and to me it's only been 5. What the fuck is happening here? I feel like I'm losing my mind.
She took a moment to respond, then said,
I don't know, Damien. When we left, the station was torn to shreds. We would have stayed away if there wasn't another message sent to Prometheus the day after. Another encryption from the station.
My head swam, the migraine from before returning.
Helen, the shit I've seen here is nothing like you would imagine. I'm getting out of here.
Filled with determination, I began to careen towards the meteor store. I entered the airlock to be met with a click from the radio again.
Damien, you need to get out of there. We can't wait forever.
I snapped back.
Helen, what's going on?
Full realization that I was not perceiving this as she was. No response, but I understood her panic when the airlock doors opened and I saw the storm tearing through the ship's force field. I screamed into my microphone.
Helen, it's not real. I've seen like 5 of these hit already. It's not real.
She screamed back.
It's fucking real enough. Our goddamn reactor is dead and we're using a backup generator. We're getting out of here.
I saw the ship warp out. I closed the airlock door, waiting for the hit. But once again, none came. Exhausted and frustrated, I stood up after waiting 20 minutes and opened the door back into the station. I was met with a bustling corridor filled with smoky people moving in flashes, and only in between each flash did I see clothing. Some stopped and glared at me, and I warily walked through them to the opposite side. Doors opening and closing on their own, parting clothing seas and smoky figures in between red flashes. I saw the iridescence. It was flashing between being primarily magenta and primarily blue. I slowly walked through the hall, my shoulders hunched at my sides. Between each flash, I admired the colorful array of clothing on the ground, and during each flash I watched as the smoky figures walked right by me. I made it to an observation deck, where I sat down and tried to collect myself. Crimson dotted the ground beneath me. My nose and ears were still bleeding. I heard a voice. Sir? Who are you?" I turned around to see clothing on the ground. I got up and faced them. A flash occurred and I spoke to the smoky figure. "My name is Damien." No response. I sat back down when the next flash happened and the smoky figure was no longer there. Eventually, a longer flash of white occurred and shrouded my vision for what seemed like an eternity. When it all came to, all I saw outside was a magenta cloud with streaks of red slashing through. Behind me, though, was an endless gauntlet of sprinting clothing and smoky figures, complemented by red lights and blaring sirens. The flash happened again, and I saw the magenta cloud emitting from the planet, spewing from it. Then, another long flash, and everything was white again, silent and calm. The Nebulon cloud was rested around the station again. I clicked my radio.
Anyone there?
I said in a tired tone. No response. I looked ahead and saw a dot of brimming white growing in size. Initially, I thought it was a distant supernova. Then I thought about it. If this is back to where I started, then this would be the future, right? And if it's the future, that's not a distant supernova. That's the intergalactic railgun. I jumped to my feet and ran down the hall towards the meteor store. Before I could turn, I saw the same feminine figure from before standing where the hall is. She pointed her gun at me and had tears streaming down her face just like before. This time, however, I could make out smaller details. I recognized the face of this woman. It was Helen. Helen! Wait, please! She narrowed her eyes and said something in a dead tongue.
Morflos Valley.
And before she shot, she crossed her arm over a badge on her shoulder. A red badge on her shoulder with a blue flower in the center, with the words Flos Acidire. Then she fired. I ducked under the bolt and ran back towards the observation deck. The shot from the railgun was now in the solar system and would strike us in just a moment. Behind me, I saw a magenta hue paint the corridor that Helen was in. She gazed out a window, tears streaming. She brought the gun to her head and fired. Another storm. I looked back and watched as it swallowed the payload whole, pushing it off its course. Before the storm could hit, and without hesitation, I followed in Helen's footsteps. I gazed out, shed a tear, and fired a plasma bolt into my temple. Hello all. This is Magnetar. I wanted to step in for a moment and thank you all so much for your amazing support. If you haven't noticed, we have surpassed 1,000 subscribers, and I think we had over 400 or so in the last 30 days alone. Your support is incredible, and I can't thank you enough. The reason I do this is to share these amazing stories, these amazing, unique sci-fi stories with you all. And I feel like I'm doing that. I hope that you all agree with me in saying that we've created a space for people who appreciate these types of stories in this genre to find a fine collection of them easily, all in one place, unlike other channels where there might be only one sci-fi/science space story thrown in between all of the other random creepypasta/Reddit horror stories. I appreciate your support again. This channel is only going to continue to grow. I'm going to continue to produce better and better content. This story specifically, written by Mr. Malice, belongs to a wider series called the Derelict series, and my previous story, Treacherous Deep, was actually the first in the series. And if you were paying close attention, you might have noticed the main character of this story mention the underwater station from Treacherous Deep. I've been in direct contact with Mr. Malice, and he has agreed to open up his library of stories specifically within this series to present to you all. So over the next couple of weeks, I will be doing that with other standalone stories from other authors sprinkled in between for variety. So look forward to that. Additionally, I am considering some sort of 1,000 subscribers special, maybe like a live Q&A. I've also thought of the idea of inviting a handful of other narrators and creators onto a live stream where we could do some sort of like sci-fi space trivia or something like that, where you can get to know me and get to know some of the other collaborators that I've had on this channel as well. If you have any specific ideas of what I could do to celebrate this incredible milestone, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Finally, I'm also looking at creating a new intro, again in celebration of a maturing channel. Very excited about the ideas that I have in mind and the person I'm working with on this. So of course, I will be premiering that, hopefully sooner rather than later, maybe showcasing it on that live stream that I just mentioned. Yeah, so, I don't know what else I could say. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you for all of the subscribers who joined the Void and become Void Walkers. And for all of those that are not currently subscribed, I encourage you to do so, especially if you enjoyed this story, because there is way more on the way. But of course, remember, astrophobes be warned.